So we're in for a bit of a treat this month because we have another Jacob Elordi film, and I kind of hope that he becomes the next Timothée Chalamet and they just cast him in everything. Anyway, there's a lot to get through, so on to the summary. The movie starts with Oliver's character. He's telling the story of his past. He says that he wasn't in love with Felix. We get a montage then of handsome, charismatic, fun Felix. See, nobody believed that Oliver wasn't in love with him because everybody was in love with Felix. Everybody fawned all over him. Oliver does admit that while he wasn't in love with Felix, he did love him. It was impossible not to love Felix. It's the start of the semester and Oliver has just arrived at Oxford University, and very soon after his arrival, he sees another guy named Felix holding court with a group of friends. Oliver quickly hides himself though when Felix looks in his direction. The two don't know each other at this point. Oliver has a tutorial session with a classmate and they're academically competitive. The other student, named Farley, is a legacy student. His mother went to Oxford, and the professor makes no secret of the fact that he once had a bit of a crush on Farley's mother. The class divide is pretty clear here, with the professor and Oliver as the outsiders, and overly confident Farley with his air of elitism. While Oliver doesn't actually make any moves to ingratiate himself to anyone in the upper social class at first, it's clear that he yearns to be a part of the group, often observing them from afar. For the most part, he hides his desperation quite well, but his classmate does notice it. One day, Felix has a flat tire and Oliver offers to loan him his bike so that Felix won't be late for his tutorial. Oliver is utterly charmed by Felix's enthusiastic gratefulness. A touch on the shoulder, a kiss on his helmet. Felix kind of oversteps the personal space boundary in the best way, and as he rides away, he shouts, "Cheers, Ollie!" And Ollie's face, his reaction, is all of ours here. And also here later when he's at a bar and he watches Felix while sitting with his nerdy classmate. Felix sees Ollie then and invites him over for a drink. Farley, the academic competitor, is a part of this Felix group as well, and after some shots, he says that it's Ollie's turn to buy the next round of Jaeger bombs. Farley pressures Ollie into buying them, knowing that he's a scholarship kid who likely can't afford it. Even Felix does mention that it'll cost a fortune, but Farley doesn't care because humiliating Ollie is the point. Of course, at the bar, Ollie doesn't have the money, and so Felix comes by and pretends that Ollie dropped some money and he pays, saving Ollie the embarrassment. That is the start of their friendship then. While Farley remains cold towards Ollie, Felix brings him into the fold and one day tells Ollie that he and Farley are actually cousins who practically grew up together. Farley's mom is Felix's aunt, and she fled to America and met somebody who swindled her out of her fortune, and some of Felix's dad's fortune too, until he eventually cut her off. Still, Felix's dad felt bad, and so he paid for Farley's education. Felix becomes pretty comfortable around Ollie very quickly, and at one point they're having a chat and Felix squeezes Ollie's knee. In fact, he makes these physical, affectionate gestures a lot, and they're not sexual, but they're something. I don't know, let's just put a pin in that for now. Ollie is a little less forthcoming about his family, his past, his life in general, but Felix gently urges him to talk about himself, and he asks questions. He seems genuinely interested in who Ollie is and what he has to say. Ollie tells Felix then that his parents have mental health and addiction problems. It's difficult to tell at this moment whether this is performative or not on Felix's part. Maybe because it feels a little bit too good to be true. Rich, popular, well-liked, and genuinely nice and sympathetic. He also, the way that he talks to Ollie, it's as though Ollie has his full attention. So you can't blame Ollie for being utterly charmed and taken in. At one point, while they're hanging out with the group, Felix is trying to decide between two girls which one he wants to hook up with, and once he's decided, he just walks over to her and takes her hand and she follows him out. Up until the point Felix whisks her away, one of his friends was kind of chatting to her, hitting on her, and hoping to hook up with her. This is just the way that things are though in the group, I guess. It's pretty mesmerizing to see Felix in action, so most of his friends just basically have a begrudging respect for him. Ollie's nerdy classmate Michael sees that Ollie is now in the group and he warns that Felix will get bored of him. He also calls Ollie a bootlicker. Later, Ollie overhears one of the girls telling Felix that she doesn't want to invite Ollie to some party that they're having because he's an awkward scholarship boy who buys his clothes from Oxfam. So Felix's friends mostly put up with Ollie for Felix's sake. Farley makes it clear that he doesn't like Ollie, even though he doesn't put up a fight to try and remove him from the group. Instead, he pretty much makes life uncomfortable by always reminding Ollie that he's an outsider. Ollie's lack of wealth and social status make them uncomfortable and they need to distinguish themselves from him, keep him in his place. But Felix doesn't need to perform the snobbery, perhaps because he's pretty certain of his place and his association with Ollie will never threaten that. Or he's a nice guy who doesn't care either way. Ollie starts being a creep peeping Tom then, and he watches from outside in the dark as Felix hooks up with a girl. The boys then have a little falling out later because Felix's room is filthy and apparently it smells, and as Ollie says, only rich people can get away with being that dirty. He starts cleaning up because he knows that Felix won't, and Felix snaps at him then and gets annoyed. I got the sense here that he felt a little bit embarrassed and called out. This is the first time that Ollie has acted in a way that wasn't complete adoration of Felix. Anyway, Felix politely dismisses Ollie, saying that he'll text him later to hang out, but Ollie spots Felix out without him. On his way back to the dorm, he bumps into one of Felix's hookups, and they've been both left behind by Felix, so they decide to both hook up with each other. It doesn't last long though, when she asks him if Felix would be jealous, and Ollie says, well, it probably won't even register with Felix. She stops the interaction and she walks away. I mean, it's pointless for her to do this if it won't matter to Felix. The next day, after getting a call from his mom, Ollie shows up at Felix's doorstep and he tells him that his father has passed away, cracked his head on a pavement, probably drunk, knowing his dad. To his credit, Felix is a real friend to him here and does console him. Ollie also decides that he's going to stay at school and do his exams because, yeah, this is all he has, he says. He can't afford any setbacks. At the end of the semester, before the summer, Farley makes a point of pointing out that he knows that Ollie's tux is rented and the sleeves are too long, but he almost passes, Farley says. Felix then takes Ollie to a bridge and tells him about a family tradition that his granddad started. When somebody dies in the family, they write their name on a rock and throw that rock into the water. Ollie later tells Felix that he doesn't think he'll ever go home again. He can't stand the filth of it. That's when Felix invites him to his family home, Saltburn. Felix takes Ollie on a tour of this home, which is an absolute dream come true, and we get to meet Felix's eccentric family. They're very welcoming, but with this kind of wealth, of course they're kind of kooky as well. Like Elsbeth, Felix's mother, who has a phobia of stubble, so Felix makes sure that Ollie shaves. Felix is also thoughtful enough to bring Ollie a dinner jacket because they have formal black tie dinners at the house. I mean, just look at what Elsbeth is wearing to a random summer family dinner. It's insane. So it's almost confirmed now, to me anyway, that this isn't going to be some kind of exercise in humiliating Ollie in some way, because this gesture does mean that Felix wants Ollie to fit in. By the way, much like the moment at the bar with the Jaeger bombs, it's also pleasantly surprising just how not out of touch Felix is. Ollie goes out for an evening walk and he chats a little bit to Felix's sister, whose name I always forget 1 second after it's mentioned. Her name is Venetia. Anyway, she tells Ollie that she can see why Felix likes him so much, and she might even like Ollie more than last year's one. Oh god, I guess this is Felix's thing then, bringing home random scholarship schoolmates. Now we kind of have to wonder what happened to last year's one. Ollie does go on to have a nice time with the family, a rich time playing tennis and tuxedos while drinking champagne and having lazy days out by the pool. Somehow Ollie also does kind of fit in, because even though this isn't his world, he is a smart guy, he's polite, he's pretty cultured, he knows of and can appreciate some of the obscure art at the manor, which impresses Felix's father. He's not exactly a fish out of water here. One evening, Ollie hears a moan and he goes snooping and he sees that Felix's bathroom door is slightly ajar while he's masturbating in the tub. Actually, it's Felix and Ollie's shared bathroom in the house, so it's curious that Felix would be doing this with the door slightly open. But this is also kind of like Felix, who just does things like that, like indulges sexual urges without really thinking too much about it. Perhaps I'm giving him too much credit and he knows exactly what he's doing and the effect he has. Maybe he's leaving Ollie breadcrumbs to feed his own ego, because Ollie is his plaything for now and he'll soon grow bored. We don't know yet. Anyway, of course Ollie watches from the shadows, getting more obsessed and aroused, if that's even possible at this point. And then, oh Christ, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but oh well. Felix is done in the bathroom. Ollie sees the water going down the drain and he takes a little sip of it. This bath water that has Felix's body fluids in it. On a scale of 1 to the peach scene in Call Me By Your Name, this is off the charts filthy, but also kind of unsurprising when it comes to Ollie. He's been overwhelmed by his obsession for so long. This was only a matter of time. Of course he'd find some way to consume any part of Felix. Anyway, one evening before dinner, it's just Ollie and Felix's mom Elsbeth out in the garden having a chat. Ollie is getting pretty comfortable enough now to very, very subtly flirt with her, or more like he compliments her, calling her beautiful in a way that, I don't know, it feels like more. And she's so taken aback by it for a split second, and it just disarms her further. Ollie then shares with her his observation allegations about her friend Pamela, who had been staying with them at Saltburn. And Elsbeth kind of confides in Ollie. So, he's kind of slowly working on everybody in the house. That evening, Ollie meets up with Venetia. She hangs out outside of his window in her see-through dress, so she wants attention. He tells her that he could eat her just then. He puts his hand up her dress, and at first she stops him, saying that it's not the right time of the month, but he's not worried about that. Yes, if it's not clear, Venetia does have her period. Ollie says that, well, lucky for her, he's a vampire, and he licks his fingers. Jesus, Ollie. Anyway, they play this sexual and kind of bloody game, and they make out. Then he goes down on her as Farley watches from the window. The next day, Felix is in a very sour mood, and he eventually lets out that Farley told him that Ollie and Venetia kissed. Ollie lies and says that he felt bad for Venetia and he didn't want to embarrass her, so he kissed her back, but that she actually made the first move. Ollie is relieved then, and he says that he didn't want another Eddie situation. Another one of his friends from school who once came to stay, and things got awkward when he started a thing with Venetia, and that ended up ruining their friendship. The next evening, Venetia waits below the window, but Ollie doesn't go to her. He does see her, but he doesn't go to her, so she eventually leaves. One day, Ollie just so happens to be in the prime spot for eavesdropping on a big conversation between Felix and Farley. You see, Farley's mom is struggling to pay her bills, and he's asking Felix for help, but Felix says that his dad doesn't want to enable Farley's mom by just giving her money. Farley resents begging Felix for money, and Felix points out that his father has actually been very generous. He's paid for Farley's education after all, and he says that, well, maybe they've done all they can, implying that Farley might be left out in the cold pretty soon. At this point, I'm very curious how Ollie is going to use this bit of intel. The next evening at dinner, Venetia points out that Ollie is just another one of Felix's pet, but she's not upset. She's used to it. She also implies that Felix is bored of Ollie already. Afterwards, Ollie does his weirdo, creepy, but this time kind of charming manipulation thing with Farley. Maybe because Farley is kind of scary as well, so they're a pretty good match. Farley, because of his financial position, is feeling kind of vulnerable now too, and Ollie knows that. Anyway, Ollie tells Farley that if he wants to talk, they can. He tells Farley that he knows that he's having a hard time, and it's lonely and terrifying when things are so precarious. Ollie privately humiliates Farley, who then gets back at Ollie by publicly humiliating him in front of the whole family. A worthy opponent for Ollie at last. That evening, Ollie goes to Farley's room and they have a sexual encounter. It's intense, it's weird, and it's scary, as pretty much all of Ollie's sexual encounters are. But in this case, he wants to reestablish a kind of dominance over Farley. It's a weird little power play that Ollie ends up winning. And the next morning, it's found out that Farley tried to steal and auction some antique plates from the house. Apparently, he sent an email to Sotheby's saying that he had access to some precious artifacts. Obviously an attempt to help bail his mother out of her financial situation. So throughout this movie, we have multiple shots of Ollie staring longingly at Felix, and who can blame him? But at this point in the movie, we also kind of see Ollie through Felix's perspective. And these shots of Ollie are also really flattering ones. And Felix is just, laying about and looking at Ollie. Once again, I don't get the sense that it's sexual at all. So is it just a curiosity? Is Felix trying to figure Ollie out? We don't know. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about these scenes. And I'm guessing maybe after multiple watches it might become clearer, or I at least might have a theory. It's Ollie's birthday and Felix decides to take him on a road trip, but it also turns out to be a bit of a lie, and Felix ends up taking Ollie to his mom's house, something that he says he thinks that Ollie needs. But Ollie does not want to go, and he's really panicking in the car. Oh god, was the drug story a lie? Does Felix know? This car ride is so tense, but we don't have to wait too long because it turns out that Oliver has perfectly respectable, middle-class, sober parents and siblings. The family would even go to Greece every year. His parents are attentive and lovely, and oh yeah, his dad is very much alive. So there is Ollie, sat stewing in his lies while Felix is gracious enough not to really call him out on them just then. It all eventually becomes too much for Ollie, who snaps at his mom and he wants to leave. But again, Felix is the well-adjusted one around Ollie's parents, and he makes them stay a while because he sees that it means a lot to Ollie's parents. See, now, Ollie being poor and desperate to fit in was less scary than this. Him being a pathological liar who just does this for fun or out of boredom or greed, oh boy, it's worse. The boys eventually head back to the manor and Ollie is running after Felix, desperately trying to fix things. Felix is done though. He says that it's too late to cancel the birthday party that they're having for Ollie, but after the birthday party, he needs to go home. Ollie is still desperate to hang on to the friendship though. Farley shows up to the party in disguise and he says that he was invited by the family, but we can't really be sure. Farley taunts Ollie then and makes him feel like even more of an outsider. And yet this is the dynamic between the two of them, because Farley is also only in the family because Felix's father extends that grace to him. Both of them can be kicked out if the family wishes, and neither of their positions are assured. That evening, Ollie follows Felix into the garden where he's with a girl, and he desperately wants to talk to Felix, but Felix wants to be left alone. Ollie begs to be let back into the fold, but Felix says that Ollie makes his blood run cold. Suddenly, it's the next morning, and the manor is being cleaned up, but nobody can find Felix until his mother goes into the maze, and then we hear a blood-curdling scream. Felix is dead. I just know that Ollie had something to do with this. I feel it in my bones. Ollie is devastated though, and in the end he cries over Felix's grave, and then we get that scene where he strips completely naked and, well, yeah, he does that. He has sex with the dirt. In the aftermath, as they're grieving, Ollie has wormed his way back into the family, and he's managed to get Farley kicked out again. I expected more from Farley. Expected him to have a little bit more fight in him. Ollie isn't home free though. Venetia is onto him and she says that she can see that he's a nobody. She sees right through him and he doesn't belong. Then she smells Felix's aftershave on him, and it clicks further for her that Ollie is a weirdo stalker who ate Felix up and licked the plate, she says. Venetia is absolutely broken at this point though, and she ends up taking her life in the bathtub. She couldn't live without Felix. Felix's dad eventually asks Ollie to leave the house, let the family grieve in peace. He senses the poison. Ollie refuses and he says that he can't leave Elsbeth, Felix's mom, in that state. Eventually, James, Felix's dad, desperate to get rid of him, writes him a check, just asks him, how much do you want? And we see him being escorted from the premises. So yes, Ollie did name his price. Some years later, James has passed away and Elsbeth runs into Ollie at a cafe. She invites him back to Saltburn and he eventually does go back, but we see him then talking to an unconscious Elsbeth who is on a ventilator. He's saying that the last few months have been the happiest of his life, but it's just a shame that Elsbeth got so ill. We go back a bit and we see that Ollie had Elsbeth sign something, and yeah, I'm guessing she signed away Saltburn for Ollie to look after or to have. He obviously manipulated her into it though, and he likely had a hand in whatever caused her to end up on a ventilator. It's revealed then that Ollie planned everything from the beginning. He let the air out of Felix's bicycle tire at uni. He pretended to not have money for the Jaeger bomb so that Felix would think that he was saving him. Ollie obviously sent the email to Sotheby's pretending to be Farley. He also set up the run-in with Elsbeth at the coffee shop, because if you look at his computer screen, he isn't actually writing anything. It's just a bit of a prop. Turns out he also poisoned the champagne that Felix was drinking the night of his birthday party, and he left razor blades by Venetia's bath, knowing that she was extremely vulnerable. In the present day, he disconnects her breathing machines, killing the last family member. In the end, Ollie dances around the manor, stark naked of course, does some coke, and he's very pleased with himself. This is the first time that we see him really happy. And yeah, that is the end of Saltburn. If you have seen it, feel free to share your thoughts, and thank you for watching.